Hello, everybody. It is Wednesday. Hi to Ray Abbott is in the house. Gotham's in the house from Singapore. We are live. This is the view from the top. We are talking about navigating the complexities of global mobility in Asia. Now, it's a big, big part of the world. And today we're not going to talk about Australia. We're not going to be talking about India. We're going to be talking about the rest of Asia. That's the focus. And the reason we're not talking about Australia or India is because we've got separate shows on them coming up over the next few months. But we're focusing on APAC today, if you want to call it that, Asia, whatever definition you want to use of the area, but hopefully you will know what we're talking about. Anyway, so we're talking about the complexities of mobility in Asia. Now, if you're out there, please join the conversation, write in the comments box, tell us who you are, tell us what's going on in your life, tell us all the information. You can watch us on LinkedIn, you can watch us on YouTube. We're also available on Spotify as well, so you can see us there if you want to watch us as or if listen to us as a podcast. Also, I know a lot of you do like to get your CPE codes. We do have CPE codes from Worldwide ERC. We have CPE codes from SHRM. We have CPE codes from HRCI. And I'm going to leave those codes up there so you can see what they are. So if you want your GMS or your CRP codes, and many, many thanks to our good friends at ERC, those are the codes. If you want your codes from HRCI or from SHRM, then those are the codes, and many, many thanks to our good friends from Rocket Mortgage who get us the HRCI and the SHRM codes. So if our focus today is on global mobility in Asia, our show next week is equally important. We're going to be talking about immigration in the new environment. And that is the new environment in the US. And we will have experts who run immigration programs, both in-house and as advisors, all on the show. It's going to be a really, really important show because things are changing in the United States at a speed that I think nobody really expected. And if you're advising on immigration, you're advising on global mobility in the US, you really do need to tune in next week. So that's next week, immigration in the new environment. Meanwhile, what's been going on in the wonderful world of global mobility over the last 7 days? Well, let's see what all our breaking news is. Here we go. Let's find out what's been going on in global mobility in the last 7 days. So there we have it. Loads of people who've been promoted, loads of people who've moved job. Congratulations to you all. Loads of jobs out there. So if you are looking for a new role, there are lots. I know, sometimes it can be difficult, but there are loads of roles out there. I'll give a particular shout out because I saw he's in the audience, James Tomlin from London. James and his colleague Oliverenko have launched Visa Doc, which is an exciting new technology platform. I was delighted to actually have an opportunity to see a demo of it the other day, and it's pretty cool out. So congratulations to James and Ole on their new business, and we wish them all the very, very best as they develop their new business. So congratulations to you. If you've got news that you want to share, so maybe you've been promoted, you've got a new job, or indeed you've got a role that you want to fill, then let us know and we will try and get it into the publicity. So we can promote it a bit for you. Anyway, we're going to move on. We're going to talk about immigration, and I'm really excited. We've got backstage Mark Buchanan, who's the Asia lead for Fragaman, and he's going to be talking about some of the developments. Obviously, we're focusing very much on Asia this week. So everybody, you know how it works. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's welcome to the View from the Top for the very, very first time, Mark Buchanan from Fragaman. Mark, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
So, Mark, as I said, your first time on the show. It's great to have you on the show. And you're going to be telling us a bit about some of the recent developments in the Asia region. So the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. So I'll start with Singapore. There's a lot happening here. You might have heard Singapore's become a lot more complex with a new points-based system as well as fair consideration framework. But there's also a one pass, which is for top talent, for the top 5% earners. And that's a really good option. And there's been a lot of interest. It's recently been reported by the Ministry of Manpower that over 3,000 one passes were granted last year. Wow. And 1 out of 6 came from overseas. So we're actually getting a lot of inquiries from overseas. We have employees where we're being asked to help with employment pass applications, and they're asking for the one pass. There's quite a lot of advantages. It's granted for a 5-year period and it's renewable, and there's also other benefits as well. However, the one pass has also been in the news. You might have heard that elections are coming up in Singapore. And so there's been some discussion in Parliament with opposition MPs questioning whether or not there's assessment about the contribution of people on one pass. And so it's bit of a coincidence, but the Ministry of Manpower is now launching annual notification requirements. And so all one pass holders are receiving emails. So it's important for them to look out for those emails. And there's a 1-month period to reply. There's quite a lot of information needing to be provided in order to retain the employment pass and to confirm that the person still meets the requirements. And interestingly, one of the questions is asking about charitable contributions and society contributions as well. So the Ministry of Manpower have said that, while, questions are being asked about one pass, contributions, they see the importance of fighting for global talent. And so they've said that they're not going to be too tough in terms of requiring one pass, people to contribute, but, they are looking for leadership and mentorship. So something to look out for and to consider. It's definitely advantageous obtaining a one pass for companies as well, even though it's a personalised pass, because one pass holders aren't taken into consideration in terms of assessing compass.
Turning other parts of the region.
So maybe moving on to Vietnam, we are seeing companies moving operations, from China to Vietnam in particular, and other locations in the region. However, emerging markets are particularly complex, and so it's important for companies to understand what the processes and requirements are. So for Vietnam, it's a very long process requiring a lot of documents, to be legalized, and police clearance certificates legalized as well. In terms of the actual process as well, it's necessary to show 3 years relevant experience, and that could be quite complex, because the previous experience has to be exactly the same as the job and the experience that the person is going to be, the job that the person is going to be doing in country. There's also labour market testing requirements, which can add another 15 working days to the process. So it's important to consider that. Companies also are moving quite a lot of Chinese nationals to Vietnam as part of the transition of operations. And it's not an easy place to move Chinese nationals in particular. Chinese nationals, have got passports which have got the 9-dash line. So there are geopolitical tensions. In particular, there's, China contests, territory in the South Sea, which, Vietnam also contests, and, those disputes have led to conflict as well. So in terms of entering Vietnam, it's necessary for Chinese nationals to get a landing visa, and that's on a separate piece of paper and not on the passport. And so there can be queues as well, and there's that process that needs to be gone through. In terms of getting the work permit and completing the process as well, other nationals usually get a 2 years temporary resident certificate, but Chinese nationals don't get that. They only get a 1 year visa. So it means that quite soon after getting the work permit and visa, it's necessary to start the process over again to get renewal of a visa. So it's important to bear all that in mind. And Vietnam could be particularly challenging for a number of different reasons.
Okay, so thank you so much for that update. There's so much to be talked about. I really appreciate that. It's a huge amount of going on. So big stuff going on in Vietnam, big stuff going on in Singapore at the moment. So Mark, thank you very much. We're going to have to move on now. We're going to bring Julie Barron on to talk about the China update from a tax point of view. So everybody, let's hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. Let's say a big thank you to Mark Buchanan, and welcome to our stage, Julie Barron from Vialto Partners. Hey, Julie, how are you doing?
Very well, Brian. How are you?
Good. Okay, so carrying on with the Asia theme, you're going to tell us a bit about China.
Yes, I'm going to speak a little bit about China today, and I want to give a shout out to my partner, Jackie Chu in China, who helped me get ready for this. So just some kind of alerts on China, some reminders on China and things going on there. So as a basics of Chinese tax, in 2019, they enacted some legislation which basically said that if you are a foreign national and you meet certain requirements and you go to China and you're living there, you only pay tax on your Chinese source income, assuming you meet all these requirements. So when you think about that, that means in 2019, these new laws were enacted. It's been 6 years, so 2025, here we are, 6 years later. Once you pass that 6-year threshold, you start to pay tax on your worldwide income. So there's a big difference between paying tax on your Chinese source income or paying tax on your worldwide income. However, they do have what they call a tax break. So if you are a foreign national and you leave China for up to 30 consecutive days, you restart that 6-year clock. So we want to remind people that they should be getting their people out who have been in China for those 6 years. They need to take their tax break from China and leave for 30 days in order to start that 6-year clock running again. Just some things that are kind of going on with the Chinese tax authorities. There's been some increasing scrutiny on what they call the SAFE, which is the State Administration for Foreign Exchanges. And that is where companies report their equity income. So they have to report grants, exercises, vestings, disposals, and they have to report and withhold the right amount of tax. And there's been increasing scrutiny on that. And the Chinese authorities are really looking into companies who aren't doing the proper reporting. Also on the area of fringe benefits, there's been increased scrutiny on how those fringe benefits are supplied, because there are some tax exemptions for some fringe benefits in China, like housing, home leave, education, but you have to pay them properly and you have to have the proper documentation and you have to make sure it's all registered. And they've seen an increase in the authorities really challenging that and making sure that all of that registration and documentation is in place. On the how are tax and immigration related, they're also looking at work permits to make sure that the work permits also line up with giving the proper tax benefits and some of these exemptions too. So you got to make sure all of your paperwork is lining up as well. So there's a lot going on in China, and I think the Chinese authorities are really increasing their scrutiny. And Tally asked me to mention, of course, the U.S. has just imposed some tariffs on goods for China. So we also have that in the background where the U.S. has imposed a 10% tariff on goods from China with some exemptions for smaller amounts. But then China went ahead and retaliated, if you will, and imposed some tax or some tariffs on that too. So interesting times going on with China.
Yeah, I think tariffs. I know that there's this new branch of the IRS called the ERS, the External Revenue Service.
We'll see.
See what happens there. But I mean, obviously, that's going to be the word that we talk about more and more, I suspect, over the coming.
Yes. Maybe tax won't be as important as tariffs will be.
So who knows? Anyway, Julie, thank you so much for that update. That was really, really helpful. And so we've looked at immigration into Asia. We've looked at tax in Asia and in China. We're now going to go on to bring on our very special guests who are going to be talking to us about global mobility in Asia. And I'm so excited. We have backstage not one, but two wonderful experts in global mobility. We have Priscilla John from HCL, from India originally, now living in Singapore, and Mike Piker, originally from the US, now living in Tokyo. So we have two real experts. So everybody, let's hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and say a big thank you to Julie Barron, and welcome to, and I've just been told by Tally that I'm not going to welcome them yet because I've got to bring Beth on stage first. So in fact, I'm going to bring Beth on stage. So I'm, oh dear, slap
Thank
on.
Thank goodness Tally keeps you in line, Brian. Right?
That's why I have a producer. Let's bring Beth on stage now. Well, there you go. I'm not perfect.
It's okay. I'm not offended. It's fine.
So, Beth, tell us what's going on then.
I've just got 3 short updates this week. I am super excited that I'm going to be in Amsterdam again in March for the FEM. And while we're there, we're presenting on the Friday with my fabulous colleague and a couple of amazing clients. And then on the evening before, we have a social event for corporates. If you'd like to come and join us, it's going to be a little bit talking about what Benivo has been up to, a chance to connect with some other change makers, to socialize. Tally's going to put a link out. Please do sign up. It's going to be so much fun. I've also got I'm turning up to Amsterdam on the Wednesday and on the Thursday. I've got some slots open for some in-person catch-up as well. So if you're around and would like to connect one-to-one, let me know, and that would be great. Then finally, the team has been really busy, and we've just published a new blog diving into our VIP services here at Benivo. Tally's going to share the link to that shortly, and we've got a really exciting webinar coming up on that topic where we're going to really deep dive into that and explore it in more detail. So stay tuned for that link as well.
Okay, so short and sweet. Really appreciate that, Beth, and for not ribbing me too much for my view from the top faux pas. So anyway, now without further ado, we're going to be bringing onto stage the wonderful Priscilla John from HCL and the equally wonderful Mike Piker from Shiseido. So you know how it works. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's welcome Priscilla and Mike to our stage. Hey, Priscilla, Mike, I'm I got you on stage eventually at the right time. So first of all, many, many thanks. I know it's late in the evening for you. Of course, it was late for Mark too earlier. So Priscilla, start off, just tell us a bit about yourself, your background and, your company and where you are and what you're doing.
Sure, Brian. I'll take this opportunity to introduce myself. I'm with HCLTech and I manage the APAC region. I'm the APAC Mobility leader. And most of you would have been familiar with HCLTech. We are an IT global technology leader working out of more than 60 countries. And in my role, I oversee the strategic directions and execution of mobility in the APAC region.
Okay. And I mean, so tell us, how many people would you move around in your program around the Asia region?
See, on a yearly basis, we will move close to 1,000 plus people across the APAC region.
Right. So it's a big program of people. And you're in Singapore. Is it late there now? What's the time for you?
It is 12:30 a.m., almost the next day.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So Priscilla, we love you for that. Thank you so much. And Mike, you're with us too. So Mike, tell us a bit about yours. I know you've been on the show before and we're old friends, but for those that don't know you, tell us a bit about the audience, a bit about yourself.
Sure. So Mike, originally from New York. This is my fourth gig in Japan.
Wow.
Many of you know I've lived in 9 countries around the world. So Shiseido is one of the largest beauty companies in the world, 153-year history. I'm the VP of Global Total Rewards. So mobility reports into my role. So I've managed it in 9 other companies, and I've also been an expat. I think I've moved 36 times. So I'm an old hand at this.
Okay. And tell us a bit about Shiseido.
So basically, obviously, Estee Lauder and L'Oreal, we compete in that same sector, and LVMH as well. So perfumery, beauty, creams, and skincare. It's a very lucrative area. It's good for one's health and well-being. And the brand really spoke to me.
Okay. And I think what's interesting is we've got, when we're talking about companies operating in Asia, quite often we're talking about US companies or we're talking about European companies. But here we've got you, Mike, working for a Japanese company who's moving people in and out of the region. And you, Priscilla, working for an Indian company working in and out of the region. So it is a completely different perspective in every which way. So, Mike, just starting with you, tell us a bit about how you sort of came to be in Japan this time round. Tell us a bit about that story, how you got there.
Yeah, well, it's been a 30-year gap. I got the headhunter call, I'm sure like Priscilla, appealing role. It's a culture and language that I know deeply and love innately. And so to come back 30 years later on the bookend of sort of the back end of my career was like a capstone. So it really spoke to me. As I said, what we sell, the products, the ethos really speaks to me because I use the products. And I absolutely adore this culture and this country. It's something I am enthralled by every day.
And you're a fluent Japanese speaker, I believe.
Yeah, I studied almost 8 years. So it's a very tough language to tackle.
So both you and Priscilla, not only you managing expat programs, but you're expats yourself of one form or another. So Priscilla, you're in Singapore on an assignment or as a local, or how are you in Singapore?
I'm here in Singapore on an assignment. I've been with HCL for like close to 9 years now, and managing the APAC region. So this move into Singapore is definitely bringing close to what the pulse of the business is and what is the need of the hour. So I think that's giving a better, work relationship with the people that we work for.
Okay. Now, Asia is a very, very large part of the world. And obviously, it's a big mistake to think of it as homogenous in any sense. So, but equally, I think we've all got experiences of people conducting successful moves, and also, sadly, people having failed moves. So the question I want to ask is this: in which of these APAC locations do you experience the highest proportion of failed assignments? And out there in the audience, in LinkedIn world, I'll give you 4 choices, okay? You could have China, Japan, Hong Kong, and Singapore. I appreciate there are many, many other countries it could be, but I just picked on 4. But let me just start with you, Priscilla. From your perspective, I mean, you've got Asia responsibility. Which are the countries that you would say are the easiest to move people in and out of, and which are the countries that you would say are the hardest?
I would say Singapore, Malaysia, and Hong Kong are the easiest to move because the language spoken there is English, and people, expats, when they move in there, settling in becomes a little more easier because the countries are diversified and open to embracing the expat crowd. When you look at the other Asian regions like China, Japan, Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, all of these have the local language to be very strong. So when an expat has to move in there, it requires a little bit of effort from their side to kind of blend in with the locals and get along to do their work. Because if somebody needs to have a successful assignment, then they need to blend along with the country and the culture and the people that they work with. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a successful assignment. So I think the countries that have a language apart from English, people have to put in a little more effort to have their assignments successful.
Okay. And you're an Indian national who's moved into Singapore. Would you say that's a fairly easy move, or were there sort of hidden challenges that even as a mobility professional you didn't see coming?
See, from a country perspective, cultural perspective, I do not find too much of a difference between India and Singapore, because somewhere Indians happen to be a part of Singapore, and so there is always a bubble where there is an Indian, there's a Westerner, and there's locals. So each of us have our own bubbles, yet we are able to live together, yet live away from each other. So I do not find it very difficult to have moved into Singapore, because it is still home away from home.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I mean, Ferzin, I'm just going to put up Ferzin's comment there. And Ferzin says, is it Japan? The culture is wonderful, but very hard to understand what the people are really thinking. Also, all their road signs were only in Japanese. So, Mike, what's your take on this?
Well, I guess I've been fortunate. I lived in Singapore twice, Shanghai, and also Japan 4 times. So I've got felt experience, alluding to what Priscilla said. I call it Asia easy or Asia light and Asia hard. Singapore twice, relatively easy. When you hit Taiwan, Korea, Japan, China, it's a much harder slog. Language, culture, we, the Maslow's hierarchy, there's so many different ways and distances to be successful in the harder locales of APAC. And I've studied the language. If I did know the language, it would be really tough to navigate adroitly. Just to register your bank account is a slog. It's really hard. So I knew what I was getting into when I signed up for the 4th time.
Okay, so we asked this question in a LinkedIn poll, and the results were, I thought it was going to be sort of China, Japan were the hard ones, and Hong Kong, Singapore were the easy ones. And that's what came out. But what surprised me a bit is that it was so much China in the lead. 81% of our respondents said that China was the location that you experienced, or that they experienced the highest proportion of failed assignment, way ahead of Japan. And then, so I sort of expected I was going to see like China, Japan sort of up there, and then Hong Kong, Singapore down there. But actually I've got sort of China just out on its own. Mike, why do you think China there's so many more failed assignments than in Japan.
Yeah. I worked in 8 other companies, including my own, that has the highest proportion of assignees to there, but also the highest failure rate. Culture, language, those are obvious, but it's navigating and surviving and being able to understand the geopolitical tensions that are going on right now. Just give you an example. So Shiseido has our highest sort of proportion is in Shanghai and Beijing. But then, as I alluded to before, Japanese expats have had a tough time surviving in China. We had a death of a child, an expat child, sadly, September last year in Shenzhen. And many of our assignees didn't feel that it was a safe environment, so they wanted to go.
That wasn't somebody from your company. That was somebody from
No.
another company.
Different company.
It was a Japanese expat in China who was
child who was unfortunately stabbed, in Shenzhen. But
So
it got around the
race.
other expats, and they didn't feel safe, or they wanted to leave early. And these are many reasons. So my husband's from Shanghai, so I know the country pretty well, and it is tough to be on assignment there.
Okay. And Priscilla, what's your take on it? What are you seeing in terms of, sorry to be negative on this, but failed assignments or difficult assignments in China compared to Japan, compared to other countries in the region?
I would also resonate with what Mike mentioned. Language stands as a first barrier. Now, when you're looking from a business perspective, each city has a different style. Now, say I get a work permit for one city, I cannot go to another city and work. So from a business perspective, I have a lot more complexities involved to place somebody in one city and ensure that they don't move around to another city or for another client to work. So, from an operation perspective, it's going to be difficult for IT companies to function there, given the limitations and the stringencies in every step of the assignment for the assignee.
Okay. I've got a comment in here. I'm just going to share. I'm interested in your thoughts. It's from Karen Menendez. She says, for consideration, which I think is shorthand for this is something that we'd like you to discuss. Cultural adjustment is a process for anyone moving into any new country or culture. The degree to which that adjustment may be easier or harder is unique to each individual based on a number of factors, including their country and culture of origin, as well as their personal capacity to manage change and ambiguity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's drill down on that. I mean, Karen is making the point that it's unique to each person and based on their culture and but are there certain combinations that tend to be more difficult? I mean, is it more difficult, for example? Well, actually, Mike, great example. Okay, let's take Japan. Okay, you are an American moving into Japan.
Right.
Your husband is Shanghainese,
Right.
so he's from China and he's moving into Japan. Culturally, is it more difficult for you as an American to integrate into Japan, or for your husband to integrate into Japan as someone from China? I mean, that personalizing about your own personal experiences.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a fantastic question. So the Japanese will look at my husband thinking he speaks Japanese, but he doesn't. But he can read it, whereas in my case, my spoken is fluent. So the felt experience a bit different, but also equally, it's, so from, she rightly asked the question, where you come from and where you go to, it's a different felt experience, how you shop, how you immerse yourself, how you engage and socialize. So if I had not lived here and I didn't know the language as an American, it would have been really, really tough. But Japan and America have a very close relationship. But where I come from an I culture, Japan is a we culture. You got Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Expand on that first of all. We'll get into Maslow's.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a Priscilla knows this.
Talk us through that.
Yeah. So if, for example, when I'm in a meeting at Shiseido, I don't interject with my I-ism as an American. I try to collectively engage as we collectively think this, and then I get closer to the community and they accept me more. If I'm more cajoling and I-oriented in a meeting, then that will be an affront and they won't really accept me as much, to be honest. So my headset has to shift and be attenuate to sort of the context in which I'm interacting with Japanese.
Okay.
And every day at work, I do that.
Yeah. And you also mentioned something about Maslow. So let's just sort of
Yeah, so a classic issue in Japanese language and culture is hierarchy, titles. So how you address the emperor, how you address your boss. You even mention your boss's name and his title before you mention his name. In the States and the West, we don't do that. But you have to, and the way you look at a business card, you read the title and then you have to judge what type of language you speak to, how senior the person is. This is really important in Japanese culture.
Okay. And Priscilla, you move people all over, high volume. You said it was over 1,000 people. You're moving them all over the Asia region. What sort of tips are you giving to people when they're moving into a different culture in the region? What are you doing to help make sure that the assignment or the move is successful?
See, ideally, when a candidate is moving in, we give them a pre-departure induction to give them a little briefing on what is the country about, how the culture is, and what you have to do to blend along with the locals. Because at the end of the day, diversity can only be there if we are willing to coexist with the people who are already there. If I want to go and plant in my my thoughts and ideas, like Mike was mentioning, when I go with my attitude, that's not going to be, the other side also will reciprocate the I attitude. Whereas when I go there and try to become the we, try to learn their language, try to learn their culture, respect that. So then, there's going to be a shift from the way the people treat you. Like, individual efforts does matter when an expat moves. And I think that is an education that HCL ensures that is given to all assignees who move out, so they know how to deal when they land in the new country.
Okay, and a provocative question from Diogo, previous guest on our show. He says this: when an assignment fails, is the company assessing correctly the employee willing to move? So I suppose digging deep into that, basically, if an assignment fails, whose fault is it? Is it the employee's fault or is it the company's fault?
Both. It's always a split hair, but yes, there's assessment before and then there's assignment received. But the felt experience sitting in your home country being assessed for readiness, and then you land in Shanghai or you land in Tokyo, the felt experience is diametrically opposite to the assessment before you left. And so it's probably a bit of both.
Okay.
I would also agree to it. Yeah. It is a bit of both, but the real pulse of the situation is only felt when you land in there. Like when you go with a closed mindset, if I want my home to again move into the new place, it's not going to. I have to make my home there, try to see what is available and create my own home there. Then the assignment maybe will be successful. But if I go with, no, I'm not comfortable, I have people to do things for me here, I have food on my table. But when you move into a new place, you have to do a lot of things. For example, in India, everywhere you take a car, there's at the call you have a car. But when you come here, people prefer to do the MRT. MRT is so convenient in Singapore, and every MRT station has all those malls which accommodate to the needs that people will have to pick up. So at the end of the day, if I come with that mindset saying, okay, I need those kind of comforts, yes, those comforts are still available here, but you should be willing to spend a little more. But if you are, if you want to kind of ensure your pockets are always zipped, then you need to use the facilities that is more convenient and available, but a little more effort from your side. So I think depending on the individual, again, it all rolls back to the individual's mindset. Employers, yes, they can take care in terms of your assignment, ensuring that you have a good compensation and giving you a good work culture. But the individual mindset is what decides whether he or she, the attitude they show is what is going to ensure that their assignment is successful or going to be a failure.
Yeah, I mean, Singapore seems to be one of those places where people go to on assignment and they just end up staying for a long time. I know we had Mark Buchanan on earlier from Fragment, and I think you say he's been there he'll tell us at the end, he's been there for 30 years or something. So people do move out and just stay, which isn't necessarily the case when you're talking about someone going to Vietnam or Taiwan or China or maybe Japan as well. I appreciate, Mike, you're a bit of a boomerang. You've been sort of going back there a couple of times in your life. But is that going back to the fact that Singapore, maybe similarly Hong Kong, expat Lite, it's just that much easier to live there as a non-national? Priscilla, what's your...
I think I lost you in between. Brian, can you repeat it, please?
Yes, I think Brian has some troubles connecting. He's going to change to a new location. But in the meantime, Priscilla, maybe you want to elaborate a little bit more about living in Singapore. So you've been living there for quite a while.
Yes. Singapore is a nice country to talk about. It's like, it gives a lot of facilities and comfort for expats moving in there. Yes, there are limitations in terms of, rules. Rules is what is going to bind somebody to have... actually, rules are something that makes the other person coexist happily and ensuring their space and their freedom is not compromised. And I think in that way...
Brian, you're disturbing. The woman is talking.
All right. So I think when it comes to certain rules, the way it is implemented in Singapore is actually building up the safety and the comfort of people who move in there. Now, when you look at Singapore, you have people, you'll find Westerners, you'll find Indians, you'll find all nationalities, all mixed people. And how do they coexist? Yes, there are bubbles, people live, for some are very comfortable to sit within their own bubble, find places where, the Indians stay, or like Westerners say, they try and find hubs there. But if we need to blend along with the people, we somehow have to connect and ensure that we connect with the locals, try their local food, try and, get acquainted with what the country has to offer. It has many beautiful things, which kind of, and the beautiful thing about Singapore is they constantly ensure that they promote what hardships people went by to build the country. So there are reminders, that constantly keeps passed on to generations and people who visit there. So I think there are lots of things to cherish there. We should put those effort to get to know the country a little bit, love the local food, and get acquainted with the local crowd. And I think that makes the country and the stay very lively.
I can't agree more after living there for 4 years, but I'm going to leave you in the good hands of Brian and say goodbye until the end of the show.
Wonderful tally there. I was having my internet went down, and it's just one of those problems of modern society, isn't it? When your internet goes down. Anyway, I am back, and I apologize to everybody in the audience. I do want to ask a question about work culture. And maybe just to ask that. So, Mike, you've come from, I know you've worked many countries, but you've come from the US, you've worked in Europe. What's the work culture like in Japan, and how big of a shock is that for people going to work in Japan for the first time?
It is intense. It's still, some parts have not changed. So working late, sometimes your staff are a bit skittish to leave before the boss leaves. In a meeting, for example, the building comfort before we actually talk about the topic, or having pre-meetings before decisions made is extremely different from the West. Exchanging cards, understanding title and status and hierarchy, as I alluded to. Decision making is, again, it's collective. It's not cajoling or individualized. So it's rewiring your headset to completely operate in a very different, profoundly different way.
Okay,
and it's important to know that.
And in Singapore, which is Priscilla, which is, we called it Expat Lite a few minutes ago. in Singapore, what's the difference in the culture, the work culture, between the local nationals and the expats? What
See,
would you say?
holistically looking at it, Singapore has a fast-paced and high-performance work culture. Now, it has got a perfect fusion of both Asian, Asian values plus plus the Western business practices. Now, when you're looking at an Asian value perspective, we see there is hierarchy, there is discipline and hard work. And when you're looking at the Western, we see efficiency and we see global outlook. So I think with those two fused in, I think the culture is same for both the locals and expats. I think there is no, I don't see too much of favorism or partiality in the country. If you're willing to give your best shot, I think you see growth. And that way, Singapore's work culture is very diversified, embracing all work cultures and trying to ensure that their, the Asian culture is still there, blend along with the Western culture.
Okay. In my FEM days, I used to run events in Singapore. And one of the things I noticed is that we'd do an award ceremony, and then immediately afterwards, all the locals would go home and all the expats would be wanting to know where the bar was, where the after party was. And the culture was so dramatic when you got to that time of the evening, which is only about 9 o'clock or something, maybe even 8:30. People are sort of, desperate to go out, either desperate to go home or desperate to go out drinking. And to what extent do you find the two communities live in completely separate bubbles? And to what extent do you find that the two communities, the expat and the local communities, integrate in Singapore and indeed, Mike, in other countries that you've lived in? Priscilla, take it from a Singapore perspective.
Okay, in Singapore, when you look at, there is definitely bubbles. Like I said, expats are comfortable with their own group. So when you see, like you said, right after work, you will find expat group, catching up for the drink or something, while the locals rush home with the food packets to get home and get things rolling. So somewhere there is a difference where here they try to get to know others and build their social lives and try to extend their arms. But when it comes to locals, they do blend in, but it's not like all the time they are focused, because they have other things to take care at home, plus work. And so they try, and the blending of both is like limited, I would say. There is definite bubbles, but to break them, it puts an effort. If you most of that is broken in colleges when you have foreigners and locals studying together. That group, when they kind of move forward, that is the group that kind of blend in together, catch up, do stuff together. So when you're looking at a work perspective, bubbles do exist, and expats try to stay within the bubbles. Only work related parties or catch ups is when you will find locals and expats blend in and connect.
And I'm guessing that in Japan it might be even more extreme, the bubbles. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take an example. So I was in a service Oakwood Classic 4 months to ship my stuff from London. Osbu Juban, full of expats. Then I choicefully made my permanent residence in Hatsudai, which is very local, because I wanted to be living with Japanese. But it's same city, 41 million people, the largest metropolis in the world, by the way, but a completely different felt experience. And I chose that. I chose that in Singapore when I was in East Coast versus District 9, or in Puxi in Shanghai. So I found there's two types: those that want to sort of hang with the expat community and those that really go local. And I tend to be the latter. But when you have both sides, like I did 8 months so far in Tokyo, expat versus non, the way I talk, the way I interact, the way I shop is completely different. The price points of what I pay, who I hang out with. So it's as if you're in two different countries in different bubbles, and who you hang with and socialize with is also very, very different.
And which makes for the more successful move? The
more successful is
expat who stays in a bubble, or the expat who tries to integrate with the local nationals?
Obviously the latter. And I found the Gaijin that do stay here for 20, 30 years
from day one, they go local. Literally, they land in Narita and they go local from day one. So versus the other expats that tend to hang out in Roppongi and Azerbaijan. Very different.
And would you find the same? Is that the advice, Priscilla, that is worth giving? Is that a tip that says if you want an assignment to be successful, try and live like a local, not like an expat?
Exactly. Wherever you want the assignment to be successful, you have to try and adapt to their culture. That's when you will truly live like a Singaporean. If you want to be an Indian, you be in India. If you come to another country, you try to be that national. You try to work towards the larger good, and then you see good for yourself.
Yeah. And I suppose if you're living like an expat in the expat bubble, then all you're seeing is your friends going home every sort of month. There's another leaving party as someone's going back home. Whereas if you live like a local, you're not seeing that sort of turnover of friends. Is that something?
Completely. Yeah, Tokyo is a tough one. I don't know. Singapore, they cycle through still 3 to 5 years.
See, it depends. Again, like Singapore is a comfort zone for a lot of people. So a lot of people tend to settle here, but then with the IT companies and the rotation policies, there are a lot of people who tend to travel back. Now, some of the locals are amazing people. The only thing is you have to reach out and say like, hey, I want to be one of you, and they are accommodative and trying to take you along. So that is something I think as expats we need to put in a little effort. But otherwise, when you do that, the hands are already extended. So you have your right arm with the locals and your left arm with the expats. So you somewhere are more balanced because you have both the crowd. You are able to blend in with both. So you won't feel a vacuum out when one of your friends leaves out.
Okay. So, Mike, I just want to turn the conversation on to Japanese outbounds. Because Japanese outbounds seem to be, for whatever reason, uniquely different in some ways. As a group of assignees, there's quite a lot of Japanese specialist schools. Even the large firms got their own Japanese expat tax departments. They tend to be carved out. So tell us a bit about the differences and how you support an outbound population working for a Japanese company.
Yeah. Well, I worked obviously at Yokogawa RC earlier in my career with Siobhan and now with Shiseido. So there is a diaspora when we send our IAs to, let's say, Shanghai. They go to the Japanese expat school. They shop in the Japanese grocery store. They tend to configurate with other brethren, nationals. And the way you develop the foreign service premium, the hardship premium, the COLA, the market basket is uniquely Japanese. So it is a support system, like you said. The Big Four have Japanese tax specialists that only speak Japanese. The Japanese expat schools are everywhere in the world, and they're quite profoundly, very visible. And we support that because our outbound Japanese feel more comfort through those additional layers of support to really enrich and incentivize them to go. It's probably a higher preponderance of support than I've seen in other nationality groupings that I send.
Even more than Chinese.
Yeah. Even more than Chinese. And I've worked for 6-7 different nationality headquarter groups. The support ecosystem for Japanese outbound is much more enveloping. Tender loving care support mechanism is quite profound. Because they're natural. There's a bit of reticence to go to begin with. Safety, culture, familiarity. So you have to put a lot of sweeteners on top to really incentivize people to make the leap.
And Priscilla, from your perspective, do you find, you've got an Asia-wide role, do you find that you need different policies or exceptions for different nationalities, or is your policy quite homogenous?
No, policies will differ. See, globally, when you're looking at a mobility policy, that is going to be somewhat constant. But then, like the benefit package or, offerings that you cater will be different to each country, because each country has a specific way it is built, the benefit package is built, and then convincing the Mike mentioned about Japanese moving to another country, there's a lot of cajoling that you'll have to do, basically to ensure that they feel that this is going to be a worth move. So all countries have different packages and different benefits that are framed. Giving one to everyone is not going to kind of meet the Asia Pacific need.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and is that the same with you, Mike? Do you have different packages on?
Yeah, I mean, we don't necessarily. The Core Flex, very similar to what Priscilla rightly outlined, but the foreigner. It's interesting. The foreigners coming into Japan versus the Japanese outbounds. The way in which you engage, cajole, incentivize people is quite different. But if I look at Japanese expats in New York City with, or Shanghai versus Paris, it's the same tender loving care. You have to really throw a lot into the kitty to incentivize them to go. And
Okay.
a long talent process.
I'm going to bring Mark back into the conversation, because Mark, you're an expat yourself. You've been in, I don't know whether you're on a package or not, but you've been out of country. You've been out of the UK for, I think you were telling me earlier, 30 years. Did you find it easy, I know it's a long time ago now, to integrate into the local community as opposed to the expat bubble?
So actually, I've got an interesting background because I kind of came as a local, and so I met my wife at university, and she was from Singapore, and so I came to Singapore. I was welcomed by her family, welcomed by local friends. I started off working for a local law firm, and so a lot of my friends kind of were local and are local. So just in terms of differences in culture, in Singapore, everything revolves around food. So it's different from England, where you go to the pub and, you have drinks together. So, in terms of the people who left, the FEM event, they probably went for supper. So it's just, kind of understanding.
No, we gave them dinner. We actually gave them dinner. So they just went home. This was after dinner.
But a lot of Singaporeans will go for supper or go for durians, but it's very much focused on food.
It was the drinking they wouldn't do.
So
we're hitting the bars.
Yeah, so it is a different culture from that perspective. I mean, I now have, to a certain extent, two sets of friends. The local friends, and my kids have gone to international schools, and I've got kind of friends who are expats, and so, I mean, I think, both, kind of groups are fun, and they definitely, can mix. And I think that's a good thing about Singapore. There's a lot of fusion. It's, historically, you've got the Peranakan, mix, different races mixing and so on, and that makes Singapore an exciting place. So, kind of, I think it's good when expats, make the effort, to make local friends and to mix and not to be in bubbles. And I think Singaporeans are very welcoming, which is, so that there are opportunities. I've also, been a proper expat in Shanghai. I was there for a few years, and that was more complicated. My wife speaks Chinese, so it was easier to integrate. And I sent my kids to, it's an international school, but it was, bilingual school. And so, I think it definitely takes an effort, to integrate. But also it depends on, the company that you're working for. If the company is very international, or is it local? It makes a difference as well.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that. I'm just going to bring it back onto the stage. Beth, Julie, and the wonderful Tally that stepped in my moment of need. We are now out of time. It's been a fantastic show. So much to talk about. We're definitely going to do more subjects around Asia It's such an important region. And Mark, we really appreciate having you on for the first time from Fragment to give us your views, and we'll definitely get you back another time. To Priscilla and to Mike, you've been just absolutely amazing sharing your insights. Julie, thank you so much for sharing your insights on China. That's much appreciated. And Beth, thank you so much for your update. And Tally, as ever, and especially this week, thank you for helping out. This has been The View from the Top. We are back next week with an amazing show, Immigration in the New Environment, where we're going to be dissecting and really going into all the changes that are going on, not just the actual changes, but the prospective changes and the implications of that for the people on the ground in terms of the worry, the consternation, the preparation that is going on all around the US at every level at the moment. So everybody, thank you so much. This has been The View from the Top. I'm your host, Brian Freeman, and we wish you all a great week, and we'll see you all this time next week. Take care, everybody, and have a great, great week.